Welcome to another very special episode of Pub Talk, the unofficial official craft beer podcast of Oklahoma, where we are all about the three B's, beer, buddies, and bullshit. I'm Jeremy, and I'm joined as always by a guy who will brush his shoulder and drink all the beer from here to Boulder, Michael. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down in Tulsa's newest tap room to have a chat with Jeremy Diamond of Welltown Brewing. Make sure to go follow them on all the social media at Welltown Brewing. All right, let's get this party started.
That was quite the intro, by the way.
Thanks.
That was, that sounded like you guys worked hard on that one.
Something
about brush your hair? That's all I got. Okay.
So, I guess we should just start with, just kind of talk to us about how Welltown Brewing came to be, how you got the name, how you got started brewing, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So it's been a 3-year journey. Me and my father-in-law, I moved back from overseas. I was teaching overseas with my wife early on, and we got back kind of looking for the next thing, next adventure, if you want to say. So me and my father-in-law started discussing the opportunity with the laws changing, with kind of seeing down the pipeline, things in Oklahoma were changing for the better of craft beer, perhaps an endeavor in craft beer. I fell in love with craft beer when I was actually in South Korea, overseas. I had a good friend of mine that was an engineer, but he was a home brewer. So I remember late nights going up to his apartment in South Korea and experiencing craft beer for the first time. So that was kind of an interesting introduction to craft beer. When I came back to the stateside, my father-in-law just happened to pick up home brewing as well. So as you guys might know, the home brewers' dream is to always open up a brewery.
Sure.
And we had talked about it early on, about the opportunity of doing that. And next thing you know, 3 years later, we are doing it. But it was obviously a lot longer journey than just talking about it. It was one of those things where we actually started looking at the numbers, looking at locations. This was our third location that we landed on. The first location actually over off of 11th Street, in between Utica and Peoria. Ike's Chili, if you're familiar with Ike's Chili, just to the east or just to the right of Ike's Chili, there was a couple places, about 3,000 square foot space. And then one was across the street on Cheyenne. It was a 6,000 square foot space. Didn't work out because the brick bid just to fix the brick, not talking about doing anything to it, just to fix the brick, was over $60,000. So really quickly we realized that that wasn't going to work out. And then the owner of this building came to us. I worked closely with him, and long story short, he said this building wasn't doing what it should be doing. He saw much more in this neighborhood, a lot more for this building. So he basically gave us the reins and said, do what you want with it. So 15 months of build out, and here we are.
Awesome. Very cool. Welltown, I'm assuming it's like an oil well based on the logo and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So Welltown comes from early Tulsa, oil capital of the world, 1920s. The whole idea was to bring something back to Tulsa, bring something very Tulsa-focused. Obviously, most people in Tulsa know that it was oil that really got this place up and going. And also, too, is it kind of speaks to this building, that year or the years that was in this building. It's very reminiscent to that same time period, kind of the rough brick and the aesthetics of this place kind of spoke to it, too. But, oil, early Tulsa. I think what it really came down to was one day I was looking through old photos of these prairies, and then literally, maybe it was like the Glenpool photos or whatever, these oil wells just popping up. And literally overnight, this boomtown was created, or Welltown. So that's kind of the thinking behind the name.
Right.
Speaking of the oil rig thing, you guys had an awesome presentation at Hop Jam with the oil rig that you had set up there. Maybe you had something to do with TU?
Yes, yeah. So we teamed up with TU. I was approached early on with, hey, the engineering department, basically before students graduate, they have this last big project, and they came to us and said, hey, do you want anything built? And if you've been to any kind of beer festivals, you know that everyone has these tents. Everyone has basically the same look, just different banners. If you know anything about me, I like to think out of the box. I like to do things differently. So this is one thing that we said, you know what? We might not have shade because of the sun, but we will have a kick-ass booth. So long story short, we started discussions with TU engineering students. Say, hey, how can we create the coolest booth and or something that's going to be functional for us to pour beer out of. So yeah, Hop Jam was kind of our first coming out of this big derrick looking thing. We can put 4 beers on tap, and believe it or not, we're going to use it here off on the rooftop patio, and utilizing it kind of here in the space as well. So it's kind of a fun thing to do with the TU students.
Yeah, which I guess on the Hop Jam note, I'm pretty sure Hop Jam was the first time I tried you guys' sour. In a town with American Solera, Prairie, and Aragon doing these amazing sours, yours is one of the best I've had. And I just was curious if you had any secrets or anything you could share about that. It seems like, I don't know. Those guys specialize in sours. You have one, and it's just off the charts.
Well, we appreciate it. It was a kettle sour, so it wasn't mixed fermentation, so that played a key into it. Basically, the difference is quicker turnaround on a kettle sour. And as quite honestly, it was the same recipe, but the amount of blackberries that we used on it was different. So it's not necessarily the same beer as it was at Hop Jam as it is here. Hop Jam's beer was not brewed on this system. It was actually a homebrew system that we served at Hop Jam, but obviously everything here is now on our 10-barrel system. That beer turned out really well. We've been getting a lot of feedback. I'm not a huge Untapped guy, but that's one of the top beers on Untapped. Yeah. But it's just one of those things where you get into it, and it turned out to be something a little bit different. But it sounds like, according to people's feedback, different in a much better way.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your favorite part of running Taproom?
The people. It's all about the people. I think, and there's so many different business models out there right now for breweries and owners of breweries and different things. There's the distribution option, and that's the majority of what people are doing right now, and that's fine and dandy. It just wasn't something that we wanted to do, so we're not distributing right now. We're waiting for the laws to change and kind of maybe toy with the idea of self-distribution. But when you say what's the number one thing, it's all about people. We wanted to create this space for people. We wanted to create this space for people to come, hang out, enjoy themselves, enjoy the rooftop. We basically, I'm a big believer in people, and I feel like that's very easily overlooked, not necessarily just in beer, just in general with running a business. It's all about people and creating a comfortable environment for people to come and enjoy a product such as our beer. But I think in this day and age with technology and different things, going back to the old school thinking, going back to the old school way of going into a local market and he knows exactly what you want without even saying a word of like, you've always come in here and grabbed the, Reuben sandwich and exactly how it's made, blah, blah. That whole interaction, that old way of thinking of them knowing your name is something that I was wanting to bring back. So something that I was wanting to focus more on is like creating a space where we're going to know people and people are going to keep on coming back because of that, because we love the people. So that's a long-winded answer to probably the biggest thing is people interaction.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into something else I was going to ask you about. I want to say this last week I saw a social media post about not having TVs in the tap room specifically for that reason. Yes. And so I've just got to compliment you on your social media. I mean, that's how I first heard about you guys before you were ever even close to open. And it's created kind of a buzz without ever having to really advertise heavily or anything like that. So I'm curious if you have any trade secrets or anything like that on your social media game.
I think what it comes down to is getting people's attention. I mean, I am not here to be the guy that's always going to be taking pictures of beers and say, come buy my beer. We briefly talked about this very early on when you came downstairs at the bar. There's a difference between value and people are. Let me back up. With social media, with Instagram, with Facebook and all, people are used to the bombardment of ads. People are starting to get immune to that. So in this day and age, as a person that does have a product and does have a product to sell, is you want to go about it differently than everybody else. Where I think so many people are in the ask business, I want to be in the bringing value business. What I mean by that is, instead of always saying, hey, we got a great beer, come buy it. Hey, we got this, come buy it, buy it. I want to bring value in what I do. So, luckily for me, I like to bring a lot of entertainment value. So whether it's my rap music video announcing our grand opening, whether it's, I don't know, I've done lots of different silly videos. I think that's the currency of which we live. Yeah. People are on social, so I want to create content for social that brings value. So there's no secret sauce. There's just the understanding of people are on social, are on social for a reason, whether to be entertained, whether to laugh, whether to catch up with friends. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but I think for us, it was an understanding that we're not here to sell, we're here to bring value. And yes, by the way, we have a product. So I think people understand that with viewing our social, that we are a brewery, we do sell beer, but I hope people follow us not only for that, but also for the entertainment value that I hope to bring. So as far as that goes, it's just enjoying the process of this business, enjoying the process of figuring out what people like, and kind of responding on a social platform in that way. But anyways, yeah, I love videoing. I love being a photographer. I very much I storytell in that way. Before this was built, before the brewery, I did a lot of videos. I remember my wife was pissed off because I brought a camera to almost all our functions. I was always videoing. I was always doing stuff. So it was very easy for me to pick up a camera and document the process. But yeah, it was just something that I enjoyed doing, and I guess I do it well because a lot of people like it.
Based on the turnout for those soft domains for Instagram and Facebook, I'd say it's working.
With your focus on the community and building up the tap room, those law changes that are happening later on this year, what effects is that going to have on you here at Welltown? Do you have any plans to hit the ground running with that?
Well, yeah. There's a couple really key things. I think number one is hours of operation. Because of our location being downtown, because of this space, because of the rooftop patio, we have a big draw for people to come here. The unfortunate thing with that is turning people away whenever it's 9 o'clock and people want to come and drink because they're just now getting started for the night, and us saying, oh, sorry, we're closed. Wait, you're closed? So I think one of the biggest things for us is going to be hours of operation. That's going to be key to stay open later for the downtown crowd, for the people coming down here on the weekends. One of the next, very closely to that, is distribution. We're a little selfish. We want to be able to distribute our own product. It doesn't make sense for me to sign up with a Jarbo or a LDF or a Boardwalk and pay them 30% to take my beer over to Tavern or over to wherever when I can pull it right out of my walk-in and take it over there myself and create that relationship. Back to people. It's all about relationships. It's all about people. So I want to go, instead of a rep just going in there, hey, I'm here and I have 8 different beers that I'm trying to sling your way. Now I can come and start establishing a relationship with that person. Say, hey, I'm the Welltown guy. You're making a relationship with the brewery instead of some distribution company. So those are the 2 big things, is just the ability to stay open later and then be able to self-distribute.
One, you were talking about, people, community, everything. One of the things I really like about this particular brewery is it's right near my job, my day job. I can walk over here after work, be part of that 5 o'clock happy hour crowd. But you've also got the Brady Theater over here. You've got many bars and restaurants and whatnot nearby that also lend to a different crowd. And I guess I'm curious, particularly with the business crowd that might stumble in here on their way home or whatever, is there any particular strategy or a beer maybe you would point them to or anything like that when they walk in here? Maybe they're not familiar with craft beer, they're wine drinkers.
Sure. So our location has a lot to play into that. As you mentioned, is having a location where people aren't necessarily seeking out the beer scene or seeking out the brewery scene. They might just be wanting a quick drink before a concert. That's right across the street. They might want a quick drink as they go to the art walk, because obviously we're within walking distance of the First Friday's art walk. So we knew that coming into this, so we knew that approachable beers were very important. So I would say our Pilsner and our Cream Ale are probably one of well, they're obviously one of the top sellers, but not only that, is one of the most approachable beers that we have, that we can say, hey, you're not normally a craft beer drinker, you might be, I don't know, a Stella drinker or like a Bud Light or whatever. We can push them towards like a, hey, try this Pilsner, or hey, try this Cream Ale. More of a sessionable, lighter, obviously, type craft beer, but at the same time trying to hook them. Yeah. Trying to hook them into loving the craft and loving more than what InBev tries to push. Right. So, yes, I mean, knowing this location, knowing that they were going to have a lot of those different types of people coming through here, having more of the approachable beers was very important to us.
Very cool. Talk a little bit about some of your best-selling beers. Do you personally have a favorite style of beer that you enjoy?
You know what? I go back and forth between sours and IPAs. It's funny because I used to really be into sours, kind of dwindled, and IPAs kind of took its place for a long time. And it's kind of funny because this ebb and flow of love of IPAs and sours. Now I'm kind of going back to loving the sour thing. We have a tart TNT that's really tasty here. One that you mentioned earlier. We're coming up with a Goza right now that's going to be also really tasty. So I would say I'm probably headed back in the sour direction as of now, but still very much enjoy different types of beers. Actually, to be honest with you, like this past weekend, it was hot, so I just grabbed the Pilsner. I love just the Pils. Yeah. But with that being said, probably the sour.
So on that note, we're both big stout guys. So I was excited when I saw the white stout.
Yeah.
With the Glacier cocoa nibs or cocoa.
However it goes. Yeah.
We're experts on
this. Yeah.
So I'm curious, and this shows my ignorance on beer, I guess, but I don't know, and I'm assuming that many of our listeners don't know, white stout, regular stout, how you
it's all in the roasted. Yeah, it's all in the roasted malt. Okay. So that's obviously what brings the color. In our white stout, we didn't use any roasted malt. Quite frankly, we added the cocoa nibs to kind of get that same flavor profile that you would adding some roasted malts. But all in all, we came. Jordan came to us and said, "Hey, I have this really cool recipe for a white stout. I think we should team up with Glacier Chocolate and get some of their cocoa nibs." So we got in conversation with those guys really early on. Bill, the owner, and said, "Hey, we're trying to come up with this recipe. Do you have anything for us?" And he had these crazy single source beans that came from the jungles of wherever. And he's like, "Dude, I have the cocoa nibs for you." I mean, he was obviously geeking out big time over these cocoa nibs, those cacao or whatever you want to call them, the nibs. We'll call them the nibs. He was freaking out huge over them, and we're like, "Okay, great, let's add them." Anyways, long story short, it ended up becoming a great beer, something that we're quite proud of, and the people that come in and ask for the white stout, you have obviously some understanding of the coloring, but there's so many times I've handed them a beer, they're like, "This is not what I ordered." Well, it is. Just try it. It doesn't look like a stout, but it tastes like a stout. Right. So, anyways, long story short, that is kind of becoming a popular little drink or a beer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's delicious. And it's funny because I think we've had one or two other white stouts.
Yeah, not that many at all.
Probably a couple thousand beers.
That's quite the quiver of tastings, I guess, right?
Well,
Do you remember your first craft beer?
Yeah, it was a ginger beer. It was going back to Korea. There was a ginger. So, for all those who don't know, in Asia, in South Korea specifically, ginger is a big staple, a big part of the culture. So there's a plethora of different types of ginger. Actually, I lied. I think there's only one type of ginger. But anyways, you get the point of there's a mass quantity of it. Anyways, the engineer friend that I had that was homebrewing at the time, he had this great ginger beer recipe And I remember walking in for the first time into his apartment and seeing all this crazy setup. I mean, it was a Frankenstein system. He grabbed these empty kegs, cut them up. I mean, you've probably seen them before. And I had no idea. For all I knew, he was cooking meth in his apartment. Started inquiring about what he was up to. Next thing you know, I'm trying this ginger beer, and it was delicious. It was different. It was everything a craft beer should be. And it's funny because he's now contacted me after opening. He's like, I am so happy you've opened it. I figured with all my influence in Korea, it was the least that you could do. So anyways, long story short, there was many a nights that I spent there drinking his ginger beer. Then he had a couple others, strawberry that ended up being really, really good. And then he toyed around with a green tea beer. So he was very much on the experimental side of things. Yeah.
It's cool to hear a different country too, because a lot of the people we talk to, Germany seems to be big.
Sure.
That's where the influence comes from.
Sure.
So something like South Korea is really,
Yeah, that's definitely the first.
Well, that all being said, I mean, South Korea is not the place for craft beer. It was just the influence that I had from a gentleman that was out of California that had that craft beer, whether it was a Lagunitas or whatever, that came and said, hey, I can't find it here, so I'm going to make it. So that's ended up, how that went down.
So we were talking a minute ago about the Goza that you got.
Yes.
You're working on. Do you have any other upcoming beers that you can tell us about? Or?
Yeah, so we have a smoke Scotch Ale that's actually in fermentation right now. That's going to be pretty nice. We have a Saison, so we already have a Saison on tap right now, but this new Saison has cashmere hop. So I don't know if you're familiar with cashmeres. It's a brand new hop. We got our hands on some, and it's going to be fabulous. So we have a cashmere hopped Saison that's coming. We've talked about the Goza. We've talked about we're going to do a Belgian double or triple here pretty soon. Believe it or not, we're already starting to think of the fall. So and it's July, but as you know, in beer terms, it's before you know it, you have to start prepping for fall, heavier, thicker type beers to keep you warm. So we're kind of starting to think about that. But I think our smoked Scotch Ale is something that we've really started getting excited about. It's in fermentation right now, but it's going to be tasty. It's probably going to be hitting our taps probably in the next 2-3 weeks, something like that.
awesome. Do you have any upcoming events you'd like to?
So it's kind of an upcoming event in the future. One thing, and I love pulling from opposite spectrums. Part of me says I love the idea of no TVs, and then part of me loves the idea of movies on the rooftop. So anyways, if we're doing any kind of events, we're going to bring in a projector and do movies on our rooftop. Now, with way the laws are, without us opening or having to close at 9, well, it's still sunlight at 9, so we can't really. And then it's still being a little warm outside at that time. It's going to be something that we're going to be doing this fall. Okay. But it's probably one of the most exciting events that I have is not only being able to share our space with beer goers, but also share it with movie goers. So we'll have movie nights. Also talked about big games out there, whether it's a Bedlam thing or whatever. So we might not have TVs in the tap room, but we will have bigger events happening around a big projector out on a rooftop. So that's as far as we don't have any dates for that, obviously, but right. We're real excited about the availability of doing that. Literally watching a movie and then looking over and seeing downtown awesome. is quite appealing.
Right. Well, and on that note, I had a question that I just thought about because I'm down here every day. The recent kind of, I guess, resurgence of downtown Tulsa. There's buildings popping up everywhere. Parking lots are turning into 5-6-story buildings pretty regularly now. Do you have any concerns about like this one across the street popping into a hotel or what have you?
I love it. I mean, I feel like it's something that has been discussed for quite a bit during this build out. So we're kind of on the fringe out here, but we're so close. Even so, but this resurgence of downtown, it kind of comes and goes. So I feel like early on when the drillers came, there was a huge influx of bars and restaurants and hotels, like the Fairfield. That's whenever they came in and did their thing. And then it was still really hopping, really a thing. And then in the last probably year, maybe 6 months, it's started to pop again. To where you see Holiday Inn down the street, you see Flats on Archer, you hear of like the Kaiser's getting ready to do their thing up here just a little bit north of us, and then OK Pop is happening. So you have this almost secondary wave coming. We love it. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that's going to say, oh crap, like a hotel's coming in across the street, that's really going to hurt business. No, I think if anything, it's going to help us and what we're doing over here. And I feel like it kind of comes and goes. Like build out times or downtown growth comes and goes. But we're getting ready, if we're not already in a big influx of building projects. I mean, GT Bynum came and spoke right before we opened. We opened on Friday. He came on Thursday and had a little private event here. And he was talking about how much money is being poured into downtown. I mean, two things that I'd like to highlight real quick is the Amazon distribution center that's going to be here. BMX right down the street. That was brought up a while back. It's kind of fizzled and died, but then like industries are really starting to see Tulsa and seeing the benefits. So whether it's downtown, whether it's the suburbs, I love being a part of this town. I love being a part of what's happening. So long story short, I mean, build out, we love it.
Awesome. We've kind of already talked about it, but homebrewing obviously has a huge impact on the
Yes.
explosion of the craft beer scene.
Yes.
There's the craft beer club phone.
Yes.
On the side of
Yes.
the state. So is there any other impact that the homebrewing has had on the development of Welltown Brewing?
You know what? So our brewer that we brought in, kind of boots on the ground, is Jordan. We couldn't be happier with picking him. He comes from a home brewing background. 5 years home brewing, same type of like Frankenstein type system, as well as my father-in-law, who I touched on earlier, had a home brewing background. Going into this, we had zero commercial experience. We tried to glean as much from others in the community, but we had zero experience on a large-scale system. I think there's benefits and there's negatives to being a home brewer. Benefits as you get to understand brewing in its most basic form. You get to make mistakes. You get to understand those mistakes and hopefully learn from them. The downside of home brewing, I really feel like, is not understanding the scalability, not understanding that there's a lot of money on the line at this point in time in the game. There's really two avenues as brewers coming up. There's only two really options, is either coming in and working for another brewery and being trained under maybe another brewer and then going off and starting your own thing. So never having home brewed, and there's some benefits to that. And then I would say majority are coming from a home brewing background with understanding of beer, just not understanding of the scaling of beer. So as far as foam, as far as the local, like High Gravity, the local the beer store here in town for homebrewers, I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that there's so many homebrewers, there's so many people loving craft. It's kind of something that we haven't really talked a whole lot about, but the fact that people can come in and try. Okay, so what we're wanting to do is a homebrew competition at some point in time where people can come in, or actually us go to like Foam or whatever and talk about, hey, we want to do a competition for Welltown or whatever. The winning beer, whatever the beer ends up becoming, we could pick a style or whatever, and saying it's going into the fall or winter, so we do a stout. And the winner of that stout submission would then be able to come and brew here the recipe that they won on, and then us scale it and us basically use our ingredients, our thing, and then we'll serve it on tap. So it'd be kind of a cool thing that I've seen done in other places. Haven't seen it done in Oklahoma or Tulsa quite yet, but being true to our roots, our home brewing roots, kind of being true to where we came from.
That's awesome. So do you have anything you want to plug, social media?
We've kind of already talked about our social. I mean, typing in Welltown Brewing, you can find us. I love the fact that Tulsa and Oklahoma is growing. A lot of people come in here asking about, okay, how many is too many? When is it too much? I don't think that needs to be discussion. I think the discussion needs to be a rising tide floats all boats, as you guys probably already heard. I think there's going to definitely in the future, you're going to reach this point. I don't think we're there yet, but you're going to reach this point of getting close to that number of breweries and saying, okay, that's probably about it. But then you're going to have some rise to the top and some just basically are there. Not necessarily in a bad way. They're not really growing. They're not really losing. But you're going to have that. But I don't think we're there yet. I think there's still plenty of headroom. I mean, you're talking about how many breweries. I mean, there's obviously a few in planning right now, but we have like 10 or 11 right now. In Tulsa for Tulsa and surrounding area at 1.2 million. There's so much headroom. Yeah. There's so many thirsty Tulsans for craft beer. I don't think we're close there yet. So excitement. Yeah. Just excitement with what's going on with the laws. Excitement with what's going on with the beer scene right now. There's a lot of people rallying. There's a lot of people getting behind us and agreeing with the direction that we're going. So as far as an encouragement standpoint, it's really cool to see that. So I don't know. Closing thoughts would be, man, go out and support your local craft brewery. I think all of us each one has its own particular flavor. That's the nice thing is I don't feel like we're really competing over the same thing. Obviously there's a little bit of that, but I think mostly each of us have our own feel, our own deal. So yeah, I mean, go out and try some craft.
Damn straight. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for another round of Pub Talk. If you enjoyed what you heard today and want to know more about the show, hit us up on pretty much all of the social media platforms at Pub Talk Podcast. Don't forget to stop by and check out Welltown Brewing in the tap room. And remember, folks, there's never been too big or hard life that you can't handle over a few beers.